With Exhibit 739, Uzziah Garcia.
In this case was a gunshot wound that entered the back. That wound ultimately, most significantly, went through both lungs as well as the thoracic vertebral column, injuring the spinal cord. After having traversed both lungs, it did enter the abdomen and injure the spleen as well.
Mr. Rogelio Torres.
In this case, 12 gunshot wounds were noted. The injuries that were produced included the brain, the right lung, liver, right kidney, thoracic spine and spinal cord, as well as the right humerus, which is to say the long bone of the upper arm.
Okay. Exhibit 741, Miranda Mathis.
12 gunshot wounds. The significant injuries included the heart, both lungs, the liver. There were injuries to the cervical spine and spinal cord, that is, again, in the neck, skull base fractures, and there were injuries to the larynx and trachea, that is to say, the windpipe, basically, as well as the pelvis.
Alethea Ramirez.
In this case, there were 4 gunshot wounds. There were injuries to the brain, both lungs, the aorta, left femoral vein, the pelvis, and left femur. The femur is the long bone in the thigh, and an injury to the trachea.
Dea Bravo.
Decedent had 8 gunshot wounds. The significant injuries included the brain, the major neurovascular structures of the right forearm, and the left upper arm, and fractures of the right radius and ulna. Those are the long bones within the forearm.
Ileana Torres.
In this case, there were 13 gunshot wounds. There were injuries to the heart, the left lung, the left upper arm vasculature, the liver, the facial bones, cervical spine, and the left humerus.
Salazar.
In this case, there were 4 gunshot wounds. There were injuries to the left internal jugular vein, that is the major vein that brings blood from the head back to the heart. In addition to that, there were injuries to the left lung, the cervical and thoracic spine and cord, the tibia, which is the long bone in the shin, and there were skull fractures with intracranial bleeding, that is to say bleeding surrounding the brain, even though in this case the projectile did not traverse the cranial cavity. It went close enough to cause bleeding inside the head.
Rodriguez.
There were 5 gunshot wounds. The right carotid artery and jugular vein were injured. Again, the carotid artery takes blood to the brain. The jugular vein returns it from the brain. Both lungs were injured, and the thoracic spine and cord, as well as the larynx, were injured.
J.C. Uavanos.
In this case, there were 3 gunshot wounds. The brain, the cervical spine, and the spinal cord were injured.
Yay. Ileana Garcia.
There were 5 gunshot wounds. The skull was fractured, again with that same type of bleeding inside the head, subarachnoid hemorrhage. There were also injuries to the right axillary artery and vein. The axillary artery and vein are the major blood vessels that run from the chest into the arm.
Tess Mata, State's Exhibit 749.
There were 5 gunshot wounds. The internal injury was the brain.
Matthew Rodriguez. 7.
Case, there were 3 gunshot wounds. The brain and the right lung were the major internal injuries.
Jayla Seguero.
There were 2 gunshot wounds. Both lungs were injured. The aorta was injured. The aorta is the major blood vessel that comes off of the heart and carries blood to the remainder of the body. And the thoracic spine was also injured.
2, Amory Joe Garza.
There was one gunshot wound, which injured the heart, right lung, liver. Those were the major internal injuries.
It was just one wound, but it went.
Yes.
Could you just show 53, McKenna Elrod.
In this case, there were 4 gunshot wounds. The injuries included both lungs, the brachiocephalic artery. That is one of the major branches of the aorta in the chest that ultimately is going to split off into the right subclavian and the right carotid arteries and carry blood to the head and the right arm. In addition, the left femur, both tibias, and the trachea were injured.
Alexandria Rubio.
In this case, there were 2 gunshot wounds. The major internal injury was the brain. The additional wound was a superficial gunshot wound to the back.
5, Xavier Lopez.
In this case, there were 3 gunshot wounds. Both lungs were injured, as well as the thoracic spine and spinal cord. In addition, there was a wound that perforated the scalp. It did not go into the cranial cavity. However, it did cause bleeding inside the head, subdural and subarachnoid hemorrhage. Yes, in that case, there was a single gunshot wound that injured the heart, both lungs, and the aorta. This case also demonstrated soot. Case number is 2022-1400.
Okay.
Case, we had a single gunshot wound. That was a wound of the head injuring the brain and skull.